some background on Japan that's very necessary to understand when you really truly understand the war in the Pacific Theater, as it's called. Their government operated using like a dual leadership. That means is they had two main leaders. One was basically a figurehead, right? Meaning they didn't have any real power. The other person was really in charge. Okay. In this case, okay, Emperor Hirohito, you see over here on your left-hand side, he's a really, really young emperor. So because of that, there's a lot of doubts as to whether or not he's actually old enough or wise enough to rule a country. That being said, the public really liked him. They worshipped him basically like a god. So therefore, he was going to stay in power and be the person who has the title of emperor. Since he was young and inexperienced, his top advisor, okay, also top general, Hideki Tojo, is going to be the person who's really in charge. So what Hideki Tojo does is basically uses the military to control the government. So it's like a military rule. So if the country is ruled by the military, okay, how do you guys, why do you guys think people follow them? They're what?
They're scared.
They're afraid, right? So the only reason the government's really in charge is because they have weapons, right? And what Hideki Tojo is going to do is basically use Emperor Hirohito like a puppet, okay? So he's talking for him, making the decisions for him, but he's kind of the face and says, hey, I'm coming up with these ideas, whereas in reality, they're all coming from Hideki Tojo. So whenever we kind of look through some of the decisions that are made by them, they weren't really decisions by the emperor, they were decisions made by Tojo. Can I go forward now?
No. No.
I'll go back if I need to at the end. All right, just some conditions and some things to understand about Japan prior to World War II. First of all, Japan did fight in World War I. They fought with the Allies. So they were allied with the U.S., with Britain, with France. However, at the Treaty of Versailles, their voice was not heard at all. And this made them pretty upset. And it's going to make them have a distrust towards some of the Western superpowers. Okay, then they're also, just like practically every country in the world, going to be affected by the Great Depression in the 1930s. So they've got high unemployment, their economy's tanking, right? It's poor conditions. So it leads to this opportunity for the military to take over the government and kind of be in control under Tojo. Yes, Shay?
Who wasn't affected by the Great Depression?
Basically no one. Like everybody, almost every country in the world was affected by it. Once the military takes over the government, there's a big push to glorify war. So by glorifying war, you're basically saying, the best thing that you could do is join the military. Everything that you should be working for should be to help the military, right? So if you're not going to be an actual soldier, you know, ration your food so that the military can eat, ration your fuel that you use. Everything that we need to do as a country is to help our military. And they're going to use this mindset to really expand. And you'll see in a few slides, I'll show you a map that'll show you the extent of the area that they expand to. And they become a very powerful empire. They become much more than just a little island that you think of as Japan. They end up controlling quite a bit more land than just that. And they're going to, just like Nazi Germany, just like fascist Italy, stress that nationalism, that Japan is the strongest, best country in the world, and everyone should believe it. And they really want to fight against the idea of any sort of Western democracy, right? The United States, France, England. We think those are bad countries, and everything that goes over there is bad. And just like Nazi Germany, just like Italy, okay, just like Spain, they're going to be using censorship. They're going to be using propaganda. Their schools are completely controlled by the government. What's set in the curriculums is specifically to make sure that people are loyal to the government. Definitely a lot of brainwashing going on, and they have a secret police that if you're speaking out against Tojo or Hirohito, you can get put on a little private trial. So once again, these conditions are brainwashing the population, definitely totalitarian, and very much trying to make sure that everyone is following the government and doing what they say. Does anyone know any examples of how totalitarian they were? Anyone ever hear of how brainwashed they were or anything that they would do? Yeah.
Suicide units.
Okay, so you think about, many people have heard of kamikazes, right? It was basically a Japanese fighter pilot would be put in a plane and they would fly the plane into enemy ships. So people were so brainwashed that they'd be willing to know they're going to die and fly it into a ship because they were that brainwashed. Good. All right. They also had a sense of racial superiority. So part of the brainwashing tactics, part of this extreme nationalism, okay, was that the Japanese viewed their society and the people who lived there as the best in the world. And everybody else in the world weren't as good, and they shouldn't be treated the same way either. All right, so you'll see this particularly when they have invasions in China. The way they treat the people in China is pretty brutal. They consider Chinese people to be subhuman or below human. You'll see that, kind of in some of their invasions, a lot of the cruel practices they had would reflect that. And then other nationalities besides Chinese were hardly human. So basically they thought of themselves as the only truly good people in the world. Right? And when you have this belief, it's going to lead them to do some pretty extreme things. And some pretty inhumane practices. So once again, this is a similar thing that you saw in Italy, that you saw in Nazi Germany. This belief that they are better than everybody else, and because they were born that way, they should rule the world. Am I good?
Good.
Then in 1936, they joined the Axis powers, and that's just an alliance between Germany, Italy, and Japan. You guys may already know this. I thought you might enjoy this picture. It's amazing the things that you find on Google. But, so Hitler, Mussolini, and Tojo right there. All right, so they're going to form an alliance. That's all the 1936 Axis powers is.
Oh, wait. So it's not even.
Listen. It's just an alliance between Japan, Italy, and Germany. That's all you got to write. It's okay if it's not word for word. Yes?
So did Japan think that Chinese people were worse than regular people?
Yes. They thought they didn't consider them human.
And then they considered other countries human?
Yes, but not as good as them.
Yeah.
The Japanese are also going to make sure that they expand. That's going to be one of their big goals.
Where did
So,
this go?
isn't there a Japanese expansion thing?
No.
There's not?
Setting the stage.
Oh, setting the stage. Put it in setting the stage. Or wait, hang on, what's below? Oh yeah, okay, setting the stage, that's it. Alright, so in 1931, Japan is going to invade Manchuria. This is about 8 years before the official start date of World War II in Europe. And when they invade China, they want to take this area called Manchuria, which is the area that's just north of like Korea. Okay, so this area right here. Okay, this is an area that's been fought over between China, Russia, and Japan for years. Do you guys remember the Russo-Japanese War?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, that's what Russia and Japan were fighting over Manchuria then. Okay, they're all... So now that Japan's built up their military and become a lot more powerful, they're just going to go take it, and it was currently under control of China. Okay, the big reason why you'd want it is because it's got a lot of resources there. Okay, rich in things like iron ore and other essential minerals to make a army. Yes?
You said it's like just above the Korean Peninsula.
Yeah, it's like right here. Just north of Korea. And it is currently part of China. It's the northeast province. All right, and then in 1937, Japan invades the rest of China, which was currently going through a civil war. And it's an incredibly brutal invasion, and many people consider it a genocide because they weren't just killing the military; they were killing innocent civilians, and hundreds of thousands of innocent people were killed. And the big thing Japan needs in order to expand is they need oil. Because although they do have a large military, Japan's island is very small. Right? So they don't have that many natural resources. The biggest one's oil. Why would you need oil in order to expand and build an empire? What's oil used for?
Everything.
Fuel, everything. I mean, everything, right? You can use it for weapons, you can use it for fuel. So obviously they need to power all their, their air force. Anything you'd need on ground, they would need oil from. Does anyone know where they got their oil from? Who gave it to them?
This is America.
The United States of America gave it to them.
Really?
Yep. So we have a ton of oil in like Texas and other parts of the country, Alaska. So we were selling oil to the Japanese. But before we get there, this is the extent of the Japanese empire. This is in 1942. So if you see it, you see what was controlled by Japan and how much extra land they actually invaded and did take over at a pretty big.
Is that their prime?
Huh?
Or is that their prime?
This is their prime. So you can see they actually do control quite a bit of land. So as I said before, the United States gave them all of their oil. And we saw what was going on around the world when they were doing that expansion, when they took over Southeast Asia, when they invaded China, right, when they're taking all these little islands in the Pacific. And we saw the aggression they had and the way they were expanding. So the U.S. said, listen, and when you guys see Indochina, that's Southeast Asia. So Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. And when we saw their aggression, we said, listen, we're going to stop giving you guys oil. You need to pull out of China. You need to pull out of Southeast Asia or Indochina. And if you don't do that, we won't give you any oil. Well, they basically said, okay, that's fine. We'll get oil somewhere else. So they continued to expand. The U.S. stopped shipping them oil. And now we're at an area of tension. Okay, so that's where we're going to stop for today. If you guys look down on the next page, you have 2 images that I want you to look at. Okay, in the box below, you should answer